Did you know that Major Mokoto Kusanagi is a lewd, horny lesbian? Well, she was in the original 1991 manga of Ghost in the Shell. However, the author himself, Shiro Masamune, actually censored his own work in later publications, including this one that I'm holding in my hands right here. You see, the original Ghost in the Shell manga contained a crap ton of very explicit and, some would say, gratuitous sexual content that Shiro Masamune himself was tired of catching flack for, apparently. He was tired of catching flack for that. He was tired of people judging him for having that sexy shit in his manga. There is literally a scene in the original manga, or so I'm told. I did eventually look this up and on Google Images, and it is indeed true. But I was told that there was a lesbian sex orgy scene in the original Ghost in the Shell manga, and that is very true. That is very true. You can look it up yourself. And it is quite explicit. It's practically hentai. I don't have a problem with that, and I'm, of course, not one who advocates for censorship. I don't believe in censorship of any kind. And this is a unique situation because I wanted this manga in its original 1991 form, as it was originally released and drawn by Shiro Masamune. But, like I said, he did eventually edit that stuff out of his work. He was tired of getting criticism for that, and he himself decided, according to Kodansha, he wanted that stuff removed. So, in all recent publications, in all, recent available publications of Ghost in the Shell, the original 1991 Ghost in the Shell manga, you can only get the censored version. Now, that's not to say that, this manga is completely devoid of adult content. I haven't fully read through it myself yet. Maybe at some point later on, I'll do a breakdown or a review of the manga itself and how it compares to later anime adaptations and such, stuff like that, the movie and whatever. I've only read a small, tiny portion of this manga. I haven't had a chance to read all the way through it yet. It's 352 pages. But I did learn before buying this version, this compilation, that it is censored, technically speaking. There is stuff that has been removed. Most famously, that orgy scene that I just mentioned. Because Mokoto, again, as I've said in my last Ghost in the Shell video, Mokoto is a very different character in the original manga. She is a very different character. She's much goofier, she's much sillier, she's much more young and wild in her attitude, much more vivacious, much more sexual and flirty and kind of reckless. So, she's a different character than she was in the later anime adaptations, especially the original Mamoru Oshii film. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it does bring me back to the anime adaptation that's coming out next year from Science Saru, which, as we have seen so far from the teasers, is going to be much closer in style to the original manga. So it does make me wonder, is Science Saru going to, are they going to keep these changes intact? Is any of the original, more controversial content of the original manga going to be in this anime in some form, even if it's toned down a bit, to the point where it's just, the kind of Yuri stuff we see in a lot more anime nowadays, something like Citrus or whatever. Even if it's not as explicit as the original 1991 manga was, I do wonder about that. I do wonder if Science Saru will do that. Either way, I'm still hyped to read this manga. I'm still hyped to check it out. The reason I didn't buy or try to get a hold of the original uncensored version, because it is possible. It is possible to get an uncensored version of the 1991 Ghost in the Shell manga with some of that more gratuitous content in there. The problem is that content, in order to get it now, you would have to either like read a ripped version of it online, and I hate reading manga online, or you'd have to pay a crap ton for a much older print, a much older publication that can range anywhere from like several $100s to over $1,000. And I did not want to pay that much for a comic. I'm sorry, I'm just not going to do it. You know, I don't know how far that censorship goes, but normally I'd be dead against it. But again, I guess it's kind of okay knowing that at least, if nothing else, Shiro Masamune himself in this case, the author, the original author, did, you know, do the censorship himself. Allegedly, he is the one that made that call, that made that decision. Even if it still sucks that he apparently was just fed up with people bitching about that content, that more sexual content, and Major Mokoto being this lewd, horny lesbian, you know, gal in the original manga that was more playful sexually and all of that, in between all of the cyborg police procedural action. You know, I'm fine with that. I think that's pretty cool. But again, you know, I don't know if that stuff's going to make it in the Science Saru anime. I don't know. I mean, Science Saru has done some pretty risque stuff in the past. They have. Like, you think about, like, Devilman Crybaby and stuff like that. Like, they've done some pretty risque and violent shit. And sexy stuff, and explicit stuff, and gratuitous stuff in their past anime adaptations. Even Dawn to Dawn has some, like, fan servicey stuff in there, but I don't know. Because I will say the content, the stuff that I've peeked at from the original version of this manga, it's pretty heavy-duty sexual content. I don't know that that would make it into a modern anime, specifically a modern anime like Ghost in the Shell, that at this point is so minted, it's so coded of a franchise. You know, like you think about how most modern day Ghost in the Shell fans think of the Major, Mokoto, this character, and Ghost in the Shell in general, and like the themes of the show and the tone of the show. I don't know, like, obviously they have no problem going back to the more humorous, more comical style of the original manga when it comes to the tone of the series. Like, we already see that's going to be in the new anime. So, like, you know, there's a part of me that thinks, okay, so, like, why not go all the way? Why not bring back some of that edgier, like, you know, more gratuitous sexual content? Like, this is for adults, right? Like, Ghost in the Shell is an adult manga, and all of the anime adaptations were aimed at adults as well. So, like, why not just go there? But, you know, it's 2025. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to go there or not. But it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. And that's why I wanted to discuss this, because I'm like, what will they do? And of course, I still have to read through the original manga, censored or not, to see like how this overall compares to the later adaptations and how I feel about that. But I was so hyped for next year's adaptation by Science Saru. I was so hyped that I decided pretty quickly to finally get to reading the original manga. So I will have thoughts on that. I will have a video for that in the future when I get through this book, because it's 352 pages. It's pretty long. You know, it's a pretty big compilation. So I'm like, I'll take my time. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm very curious to see if anything, if any of Major Makoto's sexier escapades end up in the anime, because I think it's pretty cool. Like, I don't know. Obviously, Shiro wanted that stuff in his original manga, most likely based on the content and based on what I've seen of it. It seems like, this guy just wanted to draw, he just wanted an excuse to draw more sexy, naked chicks, or chicks, in general. And I'm not gonna criticize that. I'm not gonna give you flack for that, Shiro Masamune. You draw as many chicks as you want. I mean, he's pretty good at that, if you can see here. I have no problem with him doing that. He doesn't need an excuse to do that. But it's fine. The orgy scene I'm referring to, it's a bunch of chicks on a yacht. I guess they're all cyborgs, I don't know, but they're all naked and they're all like fingering each other and shit. It's pretty wild. Y'all can Google that. Go to Google Images, you'll find it pretty quickly. Ghost in the Shell original manga. Google that shit. It's pretty wild. So like, it's not hard to find the imagery, but if you're hoping to get a manga, the original manga with that content in it, you're going to have to pay up or get the original Japanese version, which would require you to translate every bit of dialogue, which, I just cannot do. I don't have the patience to do something like that, so I didn't do it. But, I'm sure there's still plenty of cool shit in this manga outside of that stuff. And I don't know how far the censorship goes, or if Makoto's gay sexual escapades have been completely erased, or if they've just been toned down to the point where nobody's going to make a fuss. I don't know. I look forward to finding out, because that is cool. That is kind of neat, To me, it just makes Mokoto more interesting, because I'm not saying she was boring in later adaptations. I'm not saying she was boring or that her character was like watered down when Mamoru Oshii came around. I like his version of Mokoto. It's different. She's awesome in her own right. But I do think, as I said in my last video, to save the series from stagnation and just kind of being, because at this point I think it's a bit stale. I think, it needs a reboot, a boost, a resurgence, some new blood to revitalize it and make it relevant again. In this case, going back to the original source material and sticking much closer to that would probably be the best way to go about it. But ultimately, whether or not that ends up being the best decision is something I'll have my own thoughts on once I've cracked open this shell. Once I've cracked open the shell, the ghost in the shell of this book, and got a look at it myself. Because I will have a review. I will have a review of sorts once I've read this book from front to back, and, I'll have my full thoughts on that. But, what do y'all think about that? What do you think about a gayer, more sexually free and flirtatious Major Mokoto, who's not only goofier and sillier, but also more risque, What do you think? I think, personally, we should let this ghost out of the shell, Let her have some fun. Let Mokoto have some fun, damn it. Let her have some fun. Make Mokoto gay again, Make her horny and lewd again. I'm down with it. I'm down. I promote this, okay? I encourage this. Science Saru, make it happen. I hope your adaptation makes it happen. If not, at least give us something, Give us some saucy Yuri kissing scenes or something. I don't know. But anyway, you all get to burning and live for the passion. Bye.